On July 5th, 2019, I celebrated my 90th birthday together with Margit, Brigitte, with her husband Leo, and with their children Rianne and Daniel, and with our son Thomas, with his wife Jessica, and Thomas's son Eric. It was a wonderful day. We could chat about my 90 years and we could chat about the future. It was a great, great day. On the day of the St. Galler Kinderfest in 1929, I was born in the early hours of the day. All school children walked up to the Rosenberg, where they enjoyed a playing day together with others, and everybody was happy. My mother and my father always joined us up there, and it is a fact that my mother gave me happy hours in my early life. She told me about pyramids in Egypt, about sky and stars and the moon, and my father, he took me on the weekend into the mountains and we walked up the Sentis or other hills round St. Gallen. I went through school, the basic school. I was 17 when I left my educational part of my young life, and I started my apprenticeship at the tourist office of St. Gallen. The general manager of the tourist office, Armin Moser, was a promoter for myself. He gave me jobs normally you don't have in an apprenticeship. After the 2 years of apprenticeship, I went into the Swiss Army, and having completed that, I liked to go abroad to see the wide world. With 21 years, I started my first job in Paris. There I was part of the ticket office, writing out railroad tickets for French people traveling to Switzerland and passing their vacation days in my country. After some 9 months, I was transferred to Frankfurt in Germany. Frankfurt was at that time still part of the occupied Germany by the American Army. On the way further, I went to Zurich and met my later wife, Margit, and on the evening of December 1st, we kissed each other for the first time. Next day, I started working in Frankfurt. The Swiss airline could not operate in Frankfurt for administrative reasons of the American government. So we took over their job, and I checked in for some 9 months, all passengers going and flying on Swiss Air. Some 60 miles away from Frankfurt is a small place in Germany called Weilbach. There my mother was born in 1892, and on the weekends I went up there with my bicycle sometimes, and for the first time met my family on my mother's side. After 9 months, I was transferred to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was a new place. and there I had to learn quite quickly the Dutch language, because after a few weeks my boss wanted me that I would be in the information service, give information about Switzerland. It was a most pleasant time in Holland. I liked the country. It was a beautiful time there, and Margaret visited me once or twice before I was transferred to Milan. Milan I was for a few months, and then suddenly I started my career in London. In London I had to learn a better English, and after a year's time was the big date that with Margaret I went on my honeymoon.
It was the happiest day of my life.
What did you do?
I married him.
I loved you, but for you it was the total picture.
Yeah.
I was the total
For me it was
picture.
freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Margaret and I stayed for 12 years in London, and later on, in the years to come, Brigitte and Thomas were born, and the family was now a 4-leaf clayblatt. We were all happy, the children grew up, and finally a dog joined us, and even Margaret was happy. We were complete. On the weekends I joined the family. We went down to the seaside. We had an own home. We bought an own home for the first time. At the office I was responsible for group traffic to Switzerland. There were mainly school groups who spent vacations in Switzerland. In the last 5 or 6 years of our London stay, Albert Kunz became the new manager. He was now my boss. He was a boss who tried to publicize Switzerland with very interesting, sometimes unusual situations. Once he sent 200 goats down Regent Street, and next day that invasion of goats in the center of London were headlines in the local papers. The world famous 1st of April joke, where he said, "We have in Switzerland the best spaghettis on this globe." When he approached BBC, nobody believed him, and he asked me near Regent Street, where there is a park, to hang some cooked spaghettis on trees. And the representatives of BBC, watching me hanging up those spaghettis, and with a sickle, at least I hope this is the right word in English, I had to cut the spaghettis, and the film was shown on 1st of April and went round the world some 50 years ago. He gave me the courage to work in the way of promoting Switzerland at a later stage, because after 12 years I was elected to be representative for our organization in the Netherlands. We went over, and again we had to start speaking a new language. And I learned something different, because my job was a new one. I was responsible for our office. In the past I had to work on instruction what I had to do. Now I had to run an office promoting Switzerland. Marketing in those days was not a big letter word, and most things were done not in a way it's done today. I had to learn what the Dutch people wanted us to do. In other words, I had to find out what my work was. After 30 days, I had my first press conference, and some 30 journalists were entertained by me, but I told them what I wanted them to sell. And at the end of a very pleasant get-together, one of the journalists told me, "Mr. Clay, we Dutch, we come to Switzerland with pleasure, but you always tell us about your beautiful hotels, whilst more than 50% of all Dutch people go on a camping site, and for that reason that is part of where you have to give information." So I realized for the first time that I had to alter my tactics. I had first to ask our government to change the statistics, and suddenly, when it was done 2 years later, the Dutch overnights in Switzerland were only topped by the overnights of German people. One of the big items was that I could speak ever so often on Dutch radio stations, which often had their 3 or 5 or 8 minutes sequences free, where they were happy to get information about other countries. I had spots on Dutch radio more than 1,000 times, and it was just a pleasure to meet with media and with travel agents. One of the most interesting things I ever have done in the Netherlands was a Swiss fortnight in Maastricht. And you all know André Rieu, he plays there quite often. But there we had for 2 weeks a ski area where you could do langlauf and downhill. And we could find an arrangement with the school authorities that all school children of Maastricht from the 1st to the 6th grade could ski on these ski slopes, and this plain was full of Swiss flags. It was the most attractive activity I ever have done in Holland. But after 12 years again, our board of directors wanted me to take over the job in New York. And coming to New York was for me a dream world, and Margaret was shocked by the news that we would leave the Netherlands. But after a night, Margaret gave in and said, "I come with you to New York." And another few years started in a new world where I started realizing that everywhere on this globe, a marketing product is not necessarily the same. Not even the clients who buy a product are not the same. In Holland, everybody could travel to Switzerland by train, by car. In the United States, when I arrived there, I first had to learn that only 5% of Americans had passports, and only therefore every 20th American had the chance to travel to Switzerland. So I went to university, evening classes, and refreshed my marketing work, and realized that working in the United States was a completely different way I had to do than what I did in Amsterdam. In the United States, I had 3 deals I had to be successful in. We were representatives of the Swiss railroads. We sold in the best years for about $25 million railroad tickets in Switzerland and other parts of Europe. I had to have good contacts with travel agents, and we had good contact with the media, television, radio, with papers, and in conjunction and working together with Swissair, we often organized information trips for travel agents and for media people to Switzerland. I didn't have a basic, unique product of Switzerland. United States citizens went to Switzerland to see Lucerne, probably on a round tour, 14 days round tour through Europe, but they didn't stay for 5 or 10 days in Switzerland. In those days, in Switzerland, they built and completed a railroad tunnel in the Swiss Alps, and for that reason it could be possible to have railroad journeys from Zermatt to St. Moritz 365 days a year. In earlier years this was possible during 5 summer months, and there were 3 railroad companies who were basically not interested in such a new launching of a super product of vacation in Switzerland. I contacted my colleagues in Switzerland, mainly tourist office manager in St. Moritz, and informed him that if it would be possible to unite the 3 railroad companies to relaunch this Glacier Express, it surely would be a success. It was an extremely hard job for finding an agreement that this connection, finally the Glacier Express started, and within the first 5 years it was an extreme demand from the United States to use this train, basically through the fact that the media, and mainly the 2-page article in the Los Angeles Times made it possible that thousands of Americans went in the first years on this railroad journey. But it is a fact that we had in the United States a basic product which was unique. Finally, on a day, our big boss came over to the United States and he told me that he would very much enjoy if I would come over to Zurich as his deputy. I had to think it over and was not at all pleased that this offer was made to me, because I realized that in the market I was my boss. I could act freely and do to have success, whilst coming back to head office and being number 2 was a fact that I was on a high level an administrator to have contacts with governments and was not anymore in the markets I liked so much. I spent 3 or 4 years at head office in Zurich, but Margaret, my wife, realized earlier than I myself that this was not the right job for me. So when my replacement in New York some years later left our organization, I asked our board of directors to send me back to New York, and this was approved, and I was in those days, for the last few years, the representative of Swiss tourism in North America. I continued my work and I enjoyed it tremendously, because being in the United States, happy and doing a tough job, which made it quite often difficult to have an ideal family life. So at age 64, I retired early, and Margaret and I realized that I came to an end of active life, and in front of us was an active retirement. Margaret and I enjoyed the years to come in the winter in Florida, in our second home, and in summer in Switzerland, in Richterswil, where we had a beautiful view over Lake Zurich, the Sentis, and quite a number of other mountains. We enjoyed these years, and we finally could come back to hobbies I had, and which during my active working time were done only in small sequences. I had quite a number of hobbies. Winemaking was my best one. Looking into ancestry, I found out that my family was documented for 12 generations on my mother's side, and on my father's side for 11 generations. I did a lot of cycling, especially together with friends, going to Eastern Europe, to Poland, to the Baltic countries, and like that the time passed and the years gone in no time. at the end of the year 2016, we moved further and realized that the active retirement time came slowly to an end, and that we had to find our last home, which is the Tertianum in Switzerland on the shores of Lake Zurich in Pfäffikon. We live here now for 3 years. It is a beautiful place. We realize that our life is not anymore as healthy as it used to be, but we do our best, and we hope that we can enjoy the next few years in peace, with pleasure, and with our family and our friends. It was a beautiful life I had, and I just like to thank always everybody who helped me enjoying 90 years. Thank you.